Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's masterclass. This is one that I've really been waiting for, and obviously, there's a huge amount of interest. And I think that just resonates with the timeliness of this topic, where we're in a hybrid world, the economy's gone hybrid, work is hybrid, learning's hybrid, and of course, as professionals, we are hybrid. And I really care about this topic. I'll introduce myself in a moment. But personal branding is another really big idea on people's minds. So we're going to link the two together in a one-of-a-kind masterclass nobody's ever seen before. And thank you for the drum roll, Omar. I love it. So if you haven't yet, yeah. Thanks, Mark. Put up your name in the chat. Tell us who you are. We've got a great group here today. And, share a link if you want people to connect with you on social too. No shame in plugging yourself, right? That's part of branding. There's also 3 little polls at the bottom to help us get to see who's here. The first question is about who is a hybrid in the audience. How clear do you think your personal brand is? And why does this topic today matter to you? That'll help us get a pulse. So votes are coming in. We'd love to see more. And then lastly, I just want to point out, and then we'll jump in, is there's a link to click at the bottom, a clink, and that's called Get Today's Handouts. There's some gems in there. We summarized some key topics, gave you definitions. You won't want to miss that handout, so click on that when you have a second. So I'm Sarah Beth Burke, and a little bit about me is that I call myself a hybrid professional, and I work in hybrid jobs, and I research hybrid professional identity. So I'm sort of this amalgam of research and practice. And this topic was something that I'd never heard of before. But like many people I've talked to, I was struggling with the question, how do you answer, what do you do? Because I felt like I was so many identities. I was changing jobs. I was trying to build my career. I didn't want to be seen as one thing. And that problem of trying to show up the way people wanted me to be, being a teacher one minute, a researcher another, always felt chaotic and not authentic to who I really was. And I did a lot of research. This became my dissertation. I started interviewing people. And the resounding thing I understood was 2 things. One, many people that are working in today's workforce have multiple professional identities. This is just becoming more the norm. And people don't know how to express and articulate what they really do, who they are. And that's when I realized I am the intersection of multiple identities, right? I work at this space that's the combination of all of them together. And with that revelation, I just hadn't thought of this before, but I was a hybrid. And in my hybridity, I'm doing things no one else can do. I have a whole new job title and label, and I didn't even know what to call it. And what it led me to realize is a new name for myself, which is a creative disruptor. That's my hybrid title. And that summarizes that I'm an artist, a researcher, an educator, and a designer. Those are my 4 core identities. And when I'm using those collectively, I am disrupting and changing things and developing new radical ideas for people and processes. So that's sort of my nugget of my identity and a little bit of my branding, but we're going to do a much deeper dive. The goals of today are these, and I think this is why a lot of you signed up. One is we're going to do some framing and definition around what is a hybrid professional, what does that mean versus personal branding, and then how they fit together. The second is we want to help you understand how this hybrid title will strengthen your personal brand. Because I think it's confusing. People are like, is it my hybridity? Is it my brand? What do they do? We're going to tell you the top questions you should be asking yourself to really dig into this branding idea. We'll also go through your fears. We hear people get stuck at certain points and we want to attack those. And then we want to end today with tips on how you can take this information and apply it practically back to your LinkedIn profile and online presence. And we'll have time at the end for Q&A. It's great if you put your question in the Ask a Question section at the bottom, because we can just see it more easily than the chat, but we'll try and get to whatever you have on your mind. So with that, I am just literally over the moon to have my guest here today, which is Mark Gutman. We met through a mutual contact kind of randomly who was like, hey, Sarah Beth, you do hybrid stuff. And I know this guy who has this great podcast called Baby Got Backstory, and the two of you should talk. So, of course, I followed up. Mark and I had an amazing conversation. And then it kind of, that was it for a bit until one day I realized, hey, Mark would be a perfect guest. Would he want to do a masterclass with me? And Mark, being Mark, is just a treasure trove of information, enthusiasm, stories, branding knowledge. Like, this is his bag. And so he jumped in and we started planning. And I was like, this is going to be killer. Even just in the prep session, it was like bonkers. So you are in store for something really special. And I want to turn it over to Mark to give his introduction about who he is, what he does, how he got here, and fill us in. Mark, welcome.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thanks for having me. And the feeling's mutual. Like, I'm just so happy to be here. I'm looking. If you see me looking this way, I'm looking at the chat. It's a little off camera, and we got people from Mexico and Canada and Australia, Denver, and friends and new friends. And so I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. I'll try to keep it quick, but like as Sarah was talking, like I don't know if any of you feel this. Like I felt like really seen. I felt like, wow, someone gets what I do, because as you're about to hear my story really quickly. Like I've done a lot of different things. So I started I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I started my career in the movie business. I graduated college. I drove out. I worked at Disney. I worked for Oliver Stone for a bit, for about 4 years as his story editor, and wrote some screenplays, did some great things, had some great successes. And I was just kind of like, I wanted to do something more. And I'd always loved the outdoors in Colorado. I came here and there was this crazy thing happening with like entrepreneurship. It was just blowing up. And I was like, these people are cool. And I got into that and I started a company and I learned how to be an entrepreneur. It was actually a tech company. And I did that. And throughout the entire time, people were coming to me and saying, hey, can you help me tell my story? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? A lot in this like marketing and branding sphere. And over time, I was also spending all my own energy and time in marketing and branding my business. I didn't like all the other parts so much sometimes. But I was really good at that. And what I like to say is I kind of became like this like accidental brander marketer. It was just, I had the skill set, but it was, real expertise in certain areas that started to ladder up. And I never knew what to call myself. And hopefully we can talk about this a little bit, Sarah, because I felt like a lot of like shame around job switching. I felt like I was leaving something and people like would be like, well, why are you leaving the movie business? It's so you're in such a good position. Like you have a great job. Like I was just like, cause well, I kind of want to do something else. And I was just feeling the call to do something else. And now when I look back, it's like what I do today is I'm the founder and brand strategist at Wild Story. And we're a brand strategy studio that works with outdoor brands, travel adventure companies, lifestyle, travel and leisure. And a lot of people say, what's a brand strategist? And a brand strategist is the ultimate hybrid role because you need to know about, we're not the logo, we're not the color scheme. I mean, we're working with the fundamental foundation of a brand. And that's what's really exciting to me. But like, I bring all that experience when working with clients, and it is like how to tell a story, but it's also how to understand a business. It's how to think about trends. It's how to be creative. And so it's not a awesome name like creative disruptor, but really it to me is like one of the ultimate hybrid roles. And it took me a while to find that. And that's why it was kind of accidental. I was like, what am I? And I hadn't worked at an agency. I hadn't kind of had a traditional path. So it was really hard to categorize myself. And as you know, like we kind of, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure today, there's this weird thing going on where like people want to categorize us, but we don't want to be categorized, but we have to be so that they can at least understand what we do, but also we want to differentiate. And I was always kind of caught in those worlds. So I'm so happy that, to your point, like I found what I love to do. It really lights me up. I love working with the brands and helping to tell their story and build their business. And it really is a bit of both of that. It's storytelling and business building. It's really cool, and those are the things I love to do. So really excited for this conversation. And as we'll talk about today, up until about a year ago, I was terrified of personal branding. I thought it was I thought it was an icky word. I didn't want to be a personal brand. I had gotten a ton of bad advice. I'll say it right now, bad advice, where everyone would be like, you don't want to be the business. You want to have a company in front of you. You don't want to be the face person because then you're just going to be saddled with this business. And I think that's horrible advice, by the way. We'll talk about now. Maybe it, when, I owned gutworks.com, I think with an X or something like that, because I was always thinking that maybe it would be like some sort of Gutman based agency. But so maybe it's not Mark Gutman and Company or something like that. But I do think that personal branding in today's day and age is so important. And we'll talk about that.
Oh my gosh. You're just speaking my language on so many levels. This idea of labels and categories is the plague. That is the thing I've been fighting against, because when you are a hybrid, you defy labels. So what the heck are you? And that's why I'm really excited about today's masterclass, because your personal brand and your hybrid identity are inextricably linked. And when you're explaining what you do and who you are, to me, that's about your brand. And then my question is, but what do you call yourself when you are that thing? So that's what we're heading to define for people today. So I want to pull back for a moment and talk about some definitions so that we're level setting people on language and terms, because what is this idea of hybridity and how are you thinking about personal brand? We have some of these definitions on the handout for you, but I do want to go through them a little bit. So to break apart where we are today, the topic is hybrid identity and personal branding. So let's take them one at a time and then talk about the connection. So in my research, I look at identity, right? And just to give a capsule on that, identity is all of our social constructs. It's our race, class, gender, religion, whether we're married or single, whether we're a sister or brother, all of those are dimensions of our identity. It's super complex. And one dimension is our profession, our occupation, what we do for work. So the definition I use for professional identity is anything you do that you make a living for, or you get, whether or not you get paid. If you're volunteering, that might be your professional identity, right? And I want to be clear on this, because when I work with people, they'll start to bring in these other identities. They'll be like, well, when I show up at work, I'm a mom and I also play soccer and I do this. I'm like, great. But those aren't the things you're doing in your job, like marketing and sales and computer coding and fundraising. So professional identities are just in that vein. Then I have a 3-part framework I've created to talk about the types of professionals that are in the workforce. And usually we only talk about 2, which are sort of experts and generalists. So the 3 types of professionals are these. I call them singularity, multiplicity, and hybridity. And singularity is typically when people have one professional identity. They're super experts, right? Multiplicity is when you do many things. You're multi-passionate, multi-talented, a gig worker, a polymath. There's a bunch of terms for people with multiple identities. The trick with multiplicity, though, is you're doing them one at a time. You're sort of bouncing back and forth. So then what do you do if you're someone who's caught in between? You're a deep expert in many areas, or you have a lot of knowledge in different things and you're blending and you're shifting and you're this chameleon. That's the hybrid. The hybrid is the professional who works at the intersections of multiple identities at once. The integration point is what separates them compared to multiplicity. So that's a key distinguisher there. So now here's the bigger idea, right, of hybrid identity and what that has to do with personal branding. And then I want Mark to help define personal branding from his end. Yeah. So when I talk about who I am and what I do at the intersections of my identities, so in my case, when I'm the artist, researcher, designer, all at the same time, I'm creating these radical innovation processes. So that's my story. But what do I call myself? Who am I when I do that? I'm not an artist. I'm not a researcher. That's where the hybrid title comes from. The hybrid title is the name that I've chosen and developed for myself to help people understand, as well as for me to articulate what I do in the intersection. So creative disruptor, as I mentioned, is my hybrid title. And then the way I define the hybrid title is my personal brand. That's my story. So Mark, what do you want to add on to that? Tell me about personal branding from your point of view.
Yeah, and I think, Michelle in the comments, and thank you for everyone in your chat. I've been enjoying it and the appreciation for my headphones. Thank you, Omar. But, Michelle is, succinctly says your personal brand is more than what you do. And I think that's what we're here to talk about. And I really subscribe to a general branding definition by branding expert Marty Neumeier, where he says, your brand as a company is the gut feeling people have about your products and services. And I think that your personal brand is very similar. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, says it very eloquently. He says, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And so, I don't think a personal brand as a definition is that different than a business brand. Now we can talk about how you manage it because I think they're very different. One's a company and one's about a person. But I think that, for me, a personal brand really comes down. So like, how do you want people on the other end to be thinking about you? How do you want other people to have what gut feeling do you want them to have about you and what you're representing? And I think what I always like to do with clients is really ask, like, what do you want to be known for?
Totally.
Like who do you want to be known for? And then we can talk about building that personal brand, and it's how you show up. And as I alluded to in my intro, I mean, personal brand is so important. People want to connect with other people. I mean, anecdotally, I can tell you we see so much more activity on my personal social channels than we do on our business ones. I mean, I don't want to interact with I don't know. I'm looking around my desk for a product name, but like GE or Nike, like the corporate. I want to interact with an individual at one of those companies, and I want to know more about them. And so I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that. But we really are living in this crazy age. Like as an example, we started this event by listing our personal contacts in the chat. And right now you can go and you can learn way more about me than you ever wanted to know. You can learn about my perspective on business. You can learn personal things about me. And part of that is what I want you to know. And we'll talk about that. I curate that. I'm very intentional. I'm not going to act at all like it's accidental. But in this day and age, we really need to curate that personal brand. And we'll talk about it a little more.
No, that's really good. I've heard people call your personal brand, it's what people expect from you. It's, how you show up, as you mentioned, and it's so much more than what you do. So thanks for that clarification too. I told Mark that this weekend I was listening to a great podcast, Design Matters, with Debbie Millman, and Seth Godin was being interviewed, and it was inspiring me so much. And they're both master branders. So listen to that episode if you missed it. But one statement he called out had to do with, hotels. And if Nike had a hotel, you would kind of have a sense already in your head of what that hotel might look like and feel like and be like. Whereas the Hiltons and Marriotts are the kings of the hotel industry, but they all pretty much look the same. They don't really stand out for a different brand promise or brand value. You can wake up in one and it doesn't really matter. There isn't a difference. So what do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah, so I had a chance to listen to that podcast episode last night while waxing snowboards, and it was awesome, and it blew my mind. And yeah, I agree. We do an exercise for our corporate brands, which is when we work on their personality, it is describe the themed vacation that your brand would host. And we go through and what would that look like? Like if you're doing a themed cruise line or a themed hotel, and you can go through and start to lay that out. And for me, out of that episode, Seth said something that was really interesting, where he railed a bit on authenticity, and I couldn't agree more. He was talking about how he doesn't really believe in authenticity, but he believes in consistency. Yes. And that really comes back to what you were just talking about in expectations. And so when we'll talk about perhaps some of the things you want to include in your communications and your personal brand, think about consistency rather than authenticity. And we talk a lot about being vulnerable, and that's always a great way to let people in and share your brand. But you also don't have to be completely vulnerable. You don't have to be completely open. And there's a lot of things that probably aren't suitable for your goals and for your personal brand that you're trying to achieve that you should share. And so I do see a lot of people oversharing, trying to be super authentic and raw. And I think it's backfires on them quite a bit.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that point about authenticity is a tricky one. Mark, I just want to check. There was a little bit of fuzziness. I don't know if a wire got hit on your microphone or if it's just on my side. So if anybody else hears something, just let us know in the chat. I want to explore this notion too of how do you figure out your personal brand? And you were giving me a list of the questions that you help use to steer conversations with clients and that you think about. So those are on the handout. Can we go through those a little bit and give people some tips on why these questions are so helpful and important? Do you have the handout up? I've got it in front of me. I can start reading
Yeah,
from it.
I have it as well. Absolutely. And the top question, I think it kind of falls into your, or the top two looks like they fall into your category, if I'm reading that
Yeah,
correctly.
I'll kick it off with the first two. I really believe, and I'm going to emphasize this for the audience, you have to be able to call yourself something. And if you're using terms like, I do coaching, I'm a leadership consultant, I'm head of marketing, I don't really know what that means for your identity. Those professional identities are very common, generic, traditional. And to stand out in today's marketplace and job, you know, workforce, you've got to have something that catches people's attention, represents, more of your authentic ability and is opening conversation. So that's intriguing because if I meet one more person that's a coder or an entrepreneur, I just kind of roll my eyes. I know what that is. I have my own stereotype, right? But if you introduce yourself as a spiritual spark plug or the chief empowerment officer, I get much more interested. I'm like, well, tell me what you mean. Like, what? I've never heard of this before. So the first couple questions are all about that hybridity. Who are you at the intersections of your multiple identities? And how are you defining your hybrid title? To me, those are two things people need to tune into.
Yeah, and a little break or comment on those two first things there, Sarah. Like this really makes me think of like positioning when we position a brand. And when I work with brands in general, we help them develop an elevator pitch. And really the whole idea of the elevator pitch is for that you to tell someone what you do and then for them to look back at you and go like, oh, tell me more. And so to
Yeah.
generate that interest. And so I love what you were talking about with the hybridity to generate curiosity, to get people to say, well, oh, I'm interested, tell me more. I mean, that's all we're really trying to do is engage in a conversation
Yeah.
and not scare people. I hope there's no financial planners on here that take offense or anything, but I always feel like, if you just come straight out and you're like, hey, I'm a financial planner at a cocktail party, first thing I'm going to do is be like, I gotta go, or like my stomach hurts, like I gotta run, like I'm out of that conversation. But if that financial planner came to me with a really awesome hybrid title, I'd be like, oh, what is that? I think another little tip, not even directly related to hybridity, is the line. I work with a very particular kind of client or very particular kind of customer, and then that way, and they go like, I'm a financial planner, but I work with a very particular type of customer. Insert your hybridity title. I work with a very specific kind of customer, and they go, oh, okay. Like they're disarmed and curious at
Yeah.
the same time. And I think that's such a
Totally.
powerful nuance to get your message across. But coming back to our questions,
Can I just add on to that real
yes,
quick before I
please,
forget this?
please.
I think there's something about specificity that's your differentiator. Like you can be a head of marketing, but what kind of marketing do you do? Or you can be a leadership coach, but what kind of leadership coaching? When you can add even just another descriptor in there, like I'm a visionary leadership coach or I'm a navigator and leadership coach, like suddenly I'm like, oh, I haven't heard of that combination. That's a nuance that sets you apart because those small details really are what shape people's perceptions of you because it's not the ordinary. So specificity, I think, is an important detail there. But I'd love to jump into the next questions.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. So I think for one of the first questions we like to answer is why am I here? Like, why do I exist? And I think that this comes and not in this huge like metaphysical way, but like, what really fires me up? Like what gets me out of bed beyond my actual job duties? Like what do I do? And I'm sure you do a lot of work around that, Sarah, with your clients and pulling that out for them to discover their hybridity. So like listing that out and figuring how that works for you. What do I do and how do I do it? And
Yeah.
this is, by the way, like we do this as a worksheet and just kind of like list these out really quickly. This doesn't have to be a massive undertaking. I know sometimes like we see these questions, we start to freak out and we put so much weight. Hey, like just, whatever is kind of coming to you and flowing to you, write it out. You can always go back. There is nothing's permanent, And so what do I do and how do I do it? What makes me different? What's my unique identifier? For so many years for me, it was like, and I fought this so hard. It was my my history in Hollywood because no one did it. Everyone thought it was so interesting. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I had this kind of like weird, shameful thing around it. Like, hey, I was there, but I'm not there. So I felt inauthentic. I didn't feel honest or integrity until I really did a lot of work around it. And I was like, no, that was like a huge win. That was something I should be proud of. But, we all carry a lot of baggage around that. So why am I different? Hint, it's your hybridity. It's the thing that makes you unique. That's so awesome.
Yeah, and I want to play with that too for a second because it's these moments that you really have to study. And I have people do visualizations when I ask them, what do you do? People actually haven't paused to think sort of from a meta level of like, what am I really doing? They just take it for granted. Like, yeah, I create some graphic design and some copy and I work with clients. But the way people do it is all different. So really use this as a moment to take a meditation or do a visualization and pretend you were a ghost in the room watching yourself do whatever you do to study yourself intensely. And then that will give you clues, I think, to add to the language of your story and all of this branding we're talking about.
Yeah. And for me, that's really hard. To your point, like everything I've done has just been my normal. And so it wasn't special. I didn't see it as unique. And so I've done a lot of work where I've asked others to reflect back to me how they see me. And then, taking that with a grain of salt, going to someone that you can trust. And that, really, even today, I was texting with a buddy because we're doing this exercise of pick your 2 words for personal brand. That's something we're experimenting with. And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think I am? And it was really interesting to get that feedback because they were things that are definitely I agree with, but I may not have come up with myself. So I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
When coming up with your personal brand, I really think like, who am I here for and who do I want to serve? I mean, this has we're talking about professional personal branding and there has to be some goals and purpose to this. We're not just doing this to be vain. We're doing this to further our career, to get more customers, to build thought leadership so that we can build up and get a better role, get better opportunities. There's all sorts of reasons that we do this, but be real honest and clear about that. And then also who then is going to consume that content, who's going to be interested in your brand, and that'll help to shape it. I think Seth talked about this in the podcast, but we always worry about manufacturing ourselves and not being authentic, but we are never authentic. We're always holding a part of ourselves back.
Yeah.
We're always grooming in a certain way. We're always wearing certain things. Heck, this shirt is part of my personal brand. Showing up wearing a cool flannel, shirt is part of my personal brand because I work with recreational brands and lifestyle brands and things like that.
Someone in the chat called me out for my earrings that I always wear a fun pair of earrings. I was like, that must be part of my personal brand.
Yeah, well, it is. And people get to know you for that. And that becomes part of who you are. And so as we start to sculpt it, think about, well, who's on the other side of that? I mean, we are literally doing this for other people. I mean, I hate to break it to y'all. That's what's happening. And so think about that. Part of your personal brand that dovetails so nice with your hybridity as well is what's your backstory. So my podcast, Baby Got Backstory. I love backstory. Part of my evolution has been going through my own backstory, referencing the famous Steve Jobs speech about connecting the dots and really looking for those things and trying to find where things intersect. And when I do that and I kind of maybe do a Venn diagram or whatever, it's like, whoa, this gives me a lot of perspective and being proud of the choices you've made, being proud of your hybridity, being proud of moving around. I saw someone saying they something about job hopping or something in the comments. And I think that there's this negative connotation to that, but What if we flip that and that backstory becomes all a win and it's the story of your life moving in a positive direction and you're building and building and building. And, it just holds up so well to this day. But if you haven't seen it, Steve Jobs' speech about connecting the dots, about how he goes back and sees all these things that were seemingly frivolous added up to all these huge influences and wins in his career. So I think
Yeah,
you can find so
I,
much from your
I
backstory.
can I just jump in on a second
Mhm.
there? I think this flipping the script comment you made is so powerful, of taking things that are negatives and turning them positive. You also mentioned the idea of owning it, and you have to feel proud of your brand and your identity. And that's a lot of work I do with people, because they'll come up with these hybrid identities and then laugh and go, I can't call myself a creative disruptor or a spiritual spark plug. And I go, why not? And they're like, well, it's silly or it sounds funny. And it takes a level of confidence building to help people grow into it or believe it about themselves. And I have them go test it and practice it with others to see the reaction, and witness how do people receive it versus what you think it feels like. And oftentimes they're like, oh my gosh, people loved it, or it landed so well. Like, maybe I should use that more. And so there's that part of it. And to your point about the hopping, that is a hybrid to a T. Like, every hybrid I've ever met is like, I have this really crazy non-linear background. How do I make sense of my history? And I believe your through line of all the reasons, you're moving around, your hybrid identity is that thread. So when I can look at my past work, I was always really creative, pushing the envelope, changing the status quo, being difficult, all of that. And that was the creative disruptor. So when I found that part of me and named it, suddenly my whole background made more sense too.
Absolutely. And I'm just looking at the chat here and I see some comments. And Ben, if you want to put a question, we can answer it. Don't mean to continuing knock authenticity. So let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation when we open up to Q&A. I think it'd be
Thanks,
great
Mark.
and it'd be really awesome. I think that we have two more questions that we like to go through. One is, what do I value most? What are your values and
Yeah.
beliefs? What do you care about? I mean, this is such a great way to build your personal brand. We find out really quickly how that works. I mean, I don't want to get political here, but like even like now, like on the front page of like USA Today, I think it was this morning or last night, there are CEOs who are either being celebrated or punished
Yeah.
for their values and beliefs of how they're putting out their personal brand. So something to be considered of. Do you want to put all the risk out there, and are you willing to take what comes, or are you, do you want to pull back a little bit and maybe not share some things that might be, super controversial? And that's up to you. I mean, you're not always going to share as a business owner exactly what you might share at, a family gathering or amongst, say, friends. But also, you do want to plant a flag. You want to share what you value the most, what you care about. I think Patagonia is always this amazing example that they really wear it on their sleeves. They talk about all the time as a brand. And then as we go out to other personal brands, we know, what they care about. And you can see, when you go to my feed, I care about, the environment, adventure, the outdoors,
Hey,
that sort of thing.
Mark, sorry to interrupt.
Mhm.
Something's going on with my headphones. So I'm going to turn it to you for a second and run and get another pair. If you want to tell a story or just finish the questions, I'll be back in a flash.
Yeah, no problem. I feel like I'm being set up like on candid camera or something like that. What's going on? I'll finish the last question and then maybe we can address some of the chat here. So, and then what's my personality? And so we talked about that. And I think you really want to think about when your personal brand is, what personality do you want to show up as? I mentioned that I show up as a brand strategist, as a creative, as someone who's adventurous, as someone who works with recreational travel, lifestyle brands. So it's really important for me to show up that way. Another thing we can talk about, when you look at my Instagram, I have this big career in people know me for writing. So you'll notice that the font I use on my Instagram posts, all my Instagram posts, is a really cool font called American Typewriter. And I use that font very intentionally. I never really talk about being a writer on Instagram, but I use that font very intentionally because that's very much me. It's different. It helps me stand out and set that personal brand. So thinking about what personality and what do you want to be known for, and even if you wanted to use that exercise. Hey, if I were a themed vacation, if I were a cruise line vacation, what would that version of me look like? And you can go ahead and work that out. I'm gonna go ahead and look at some of these chats just really quick. Chris, I love to ask someone not what they do, but what they love. I think that's great. And then let me just go ahead and catch up here. Yeah, and so Ben, like, I agree. You don't want to be completely inauthentic. You don't want to be false. I think, externally, people can smell that a mile away. I think that, they'll rip you for it. We see it all the time. We are living in a time that is so crazy for both physical brands or companies and personal brands, because everybody is expecting you to comment on things. People get all their information from brands these days, and also really a big part of how they feel and see themselves are through brands. So by no means am I saying being inauthentic is something that you should do externally or internally. I think what the comment was, back to the Seth Godin podcast, was that instead of being worried about being authentic, let's assume you're going to be authentic. Let's assume that you're going to show up as who you really are. Be consistent. Focus on consistency. Focus on showing up as that person. Now, like I said, authenticity doesn't mean I'm an open book. There's a lot of things I don't want you to know. For example, I don't post like a lot. I don't post politics. I don't talk politics at all, ever. Yeah. I also don't really do it in my personal life, but like, I just don't do that. And so, but I do have political beliefs. I have strong political beliefs. I don't believe that makes me inauthentic. I also don't post a whole lot about my family. You'll see like here and there, but I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I have a life. I've got like a lot going on beyond branding and brand strategy and things like that. So, but I'm curating a personal brand with a goal in mind that I want to be known as a brand strategist, as someone who's leaning into my past experience and my hybridity to bring information, and it's very, for lack of a better word, thoughtful and curated, but it's consistent, and I don't think it's inauthentic. And if you disagree, I'd love to hear in the comments, because I'm always looking to be challenged on that sort of stuff.
Thanks, Mark. That was awesome. Where did I leave you? Where are we now?
Well, we finished the questions.
Okay.
We answered a couple of questions, and I was addressing specifically about this comment about authenticity.
That was great. So I'd like to steer us now into fears. You and I were prepping for this, and you were telling me things that people get hung up on, what they're worried about, what they don't know they should be doing. And let's just talk about some of those barriers and things that are like the mindsets and beliefs holding people back. One of them we had noted ahead of time was getting out there, just putting yourself out there and promoting and just getting comfortable with that. So let's talk about that fear for a second.
Yeah, it's really scary. I mean, I can tell you personally. So about a year ago, I switched my Instagram feed from pictures of food and snowboarding, which I thought Instagram was for, to more business-related carousels. And probably not even a year ago, probably like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, something like that. And it was a massive shift for me, because I felt like, here I'm going to shift. I'm going to start talking, putting carousels about branding out, and everyone's going to think I'm some sort of jerk that's using this food and snowboarding platform to get business and things like that. And so I was terrified. And now I look back and I kind of chuckle, but it was a really big moment. It was hard for me to make that shift. And I had harbored that fear for years. Yeah. Like, I wish I would have done this personal branding and social media stuff a lot, 5 years ago. Things would be a lot different. It's been a life-changing experience for me as far as my career is concerned, but I was scared. And I also, it's a lot like, because this becomes a bit of your truth. You can't hide behind
Right.
your company. You can't say, hey, it's the company that's doing this. It's you. And you are open to criticism. And I get it all the time, like, and I'm still working on it. Like, people will say
Who
something to
hates
me.
you?
Yeah, it's not even hate. It's like criticism. It's
Yeah.
challenge. It's like, and I get defensive. Like, I'm like, oh no, like, I said something because I want to, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, or I want everyone to love me. Omar, you're
Yeah.
scared. Yeah, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
we're scared to put ourselves out there. Yeah, I think I shared the story with you that maybe 2 years ago, I hired a stand-up comedian, and I learned to do stand-up comedy with the goal of doing a 13-minute set at Caroline's on Broadway in New York City.
Cool.
And I've never been so scared.
Yeah.
I've written a lot of jokes. I've done like all the writing came super natural. But like, when you get up in front of people and you say, "This is who I am. This is my truth. I have something to say," and that's really scary. Now, what I can tell you is the fear is way worse than the reality, and people are hungry for what you have to say, and people are hungry to learn from you and know about you.
Yeah.
And what I'll also say is, don't let the fear of like, how am I going to keep this going for the rest of my life, cripple you and hold you back. Like, that's like such a big monumental fear. Like, how am I going to build social forever? Like, starts with one step, starts little by little. It starts with a channel.
Yeah.
If we're talking specifically about things like social media, pick one channel, use the constraint that it has. We can talk a bit about why I chose Instagram, but a lot of that was because I've tried other things. I tried YouTube. I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be cool. I want to be a cool YouTuber. Like, hey, subscribe here. Ding, 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 ding. Like, hey guys, sorry about the lighting. Like, all that kind of stuff. But like, I can't consistently show up on YouTube and create that content for whatever reason. I don't know if it's a script writing, the filming. A big part of it's the editing.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And I just couldn't do it with my schedule, with what I was doing. Instagram has become this like perfect constraint for me. Like, I know the format. I like to do carousels. It's this nice little thing. I use the same template and font. So like, I'm showing up, and now it's about my ideas. It's about what I want to say. But that all started with the first step. And if you go back through my feed, you'll see some early carousels. They're awful. They're not good. And I leave them there for a real, because I was still finding who I was. Yeah. And I had, at some point, I just kind of got the like, F it mentality. And I was like, screw it. I'm just going to ship it. And you'll see they're not great. But I was able to find my voice and find what worked for me.
So that was the point I wanted to push on and emphasize, is the finding your voice part of getting out there. Like, I felt the same thing going through becoming part of More Than My Title and expressing myself. My early newsletters are so different than where I am today because I didn't know how to say what I want to say. I didn't think I had a point of view that was worthy. So I was hiding under sharing other content and posts. And then eventually I started writing and found my voice. And now I'm feeling so much more confident of, this is how I want to show up. And this is what I want to tell people. And I'm seeing their responses are changing too. So I think there's a learning curve to the getting out there. It's the trial and error. It's finding your platform. It's getting your hair and your earrings right and your background and all of it, because there's that persona and presentation aspect. Mark, I want to speed us up a little because I think we've got such an engaged audience and they're hungry with questions. So let's just hit maybe one or two more fears, and then we are going to dive full on into all these great questions. So another fear we had mentioned is just talking about yourself in a new way. I dealt with that even just telling people I'm a hybrid professional, because I used to say I'm a director or I'm a teacher, and to get away from the identities that people told me I was. They're like, your title is X. And I started sharing, well, I'm the director of this program, but I call myself a hybrid professional because I'm doing things in this kind of way. That was a really scary way to introduce myself until I started to see how my responses were getting more in depth. I was making better connections because I revealed a new side of myself. So there's that fear. Do you want to say anything about that, Mark? Talking about yourself differently?
I just agree with that. I mean, we worry about being wishy-washy. We worry about being flighty and changing. And I think that like, for anyone that feels like they fit into this hybridity description, that's a real challenge. Like
Yeah.
it's like, hey, you were a screenwriter, then you were an entrepreneur, now you're a branding guy, blah blah blah. But yeah, it is scary, and I think that what I've realized is that when it feels right to you, it becomes much easier
Yes.
and a lot easier to be confident about that.
When you say it out loud and you say it with that confidence and authority and self power, it lands differently. I just want to try this on for a second. Imagine when you introduce yourself and you say, I'm Sarah Beth, and I start listing all the different things I do, versus I'm Sarah Beth, I'm a creative disruptor, and I'm a hybrid professional. Let me explain that to you. Those are two very different ways to explain yourself and help you connect with people. Because ultimately, I believe your audience is trying to make sense of you. They want to understand who is Mark, what is he about, what is the value he's bringing into the world, back to all of your top questions. Who is he serving? Why does he exist, etc. And the most concise, clear, poignant way you can do that is what's going to hook them more quickly and make a better impression. So that to me is sort of what people are trying to get to, is the consolidated yet very powerful description to make sense of you.
Absolutely. And Cassie has a great comment here, and I'd like to talk about
Yeah.
that. And she says, titles don't matter unless they help you with mindset shifts. Now, I would say yes and no. They don't matter to you unless they help you with mindset shifts, but they do matter to the external world. And so I think that that's something that we're really always working with. And I'll give you an example. And our titles is just, we either want to create interest and then curiosity, or clarity so that people engage with us. And I spent a lot of years being the story guy, because that's what people really knew me as. They knew I had this history. And story might be one of the most confusing words as far as a title in the world. It could mean, hey, I'm helping someone with a keynote, your brand, your personal brand, your about us page, like all these things. Like it kind of gets all kind of locked in your Instagram, your social media. It's like all these ways that we communicate. And it wasn't until I started referring to myself as a brand strategist that everyone was like, oh, I get what you do. I understand who you are. And by the way, Cassie, I hated titles. Like I did not want to be put in a bucket. Like I'm special. Like I see myself as this hybridity concept, and I wanted to be something different. But I also do think at a certain point, if the world's not receptive to it, that you need to adjust, and you need to find out what the world is receptive to. Because I kept trying and trying and trying, and I'm talking years here, and it felt like I was just banging my head against the wall, and so on that note, I would say that titles do help you, both internally and externally, both with mindset shifts. And even Sherry says, how can titles help you with mindset shifts? And she hates titles too. So maybe Sarah Beth, you want to say how can that help you?
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. I like what you said, Mark, about, titles are good and bad. You can play both sides on this. I think we are in a society where our brain is programmed to label and categorize things. We'll never be able to move into just this ambiguous state. Things will always need to be named. But where it becomes powerful for that mindset shift, when I was not sure of myself and I was just taking the titles that were given to me, truthfully, I didn't know my personal brand then. I was like, I'm director of this program. I guess that's who I am. I guess that's how the world sees me. I'll just adapt into that. But that wasn't, back to this key word today, that wasn't authentic to me. I wasn't showing up in my fullest ability when I hid behind this other title that was just generic. In order for me to show myself the way I wanted to be seen and be understood in a new way, coming up with my new title was empowering for me because it gave me new language. It let me have the creative power over what I wanted to be called. And it helped me break out of these boxes. So those were big mindset shifts. And the power of just using the word hybrid was game changing because I didn't know that was an option. I literally thought I have to go back and get my PhD or get more credentials because I need to have X thing to show I'm qualified. And really, I was qualified because my expertise was my hybridity. I had a mixture of skills and identities no one else did. but I didn't know how to brand my multiple identities. The hybrid term itself is a form of branding. So I want to jump into the ask a question area. And the reason I'm going to use it from here is because we can start answering with a button, and then people watching afterwards can go straight to the spot. So if you put a question in the chat, would you mind just jumping into the question and answer spot? And I think we already did question 1 about authentic. So I'm going to move down to the question, is a logo always necessary? If so, what would you say is the best way to create a logo? Mark, do you want to jump in?
For a personal brand, I think you're the logo. I don't think you need to curate it in that way. People want to, follow you and know who you are. I don't think I have any personal brand logo. I might have an avatar. You might see some curated shots of me in a beanie with glasses. Again, thoughtful. I mean, that becomes my logo. And I think that when we just talk about things like social, and specifically Instagram, and by the way, I learned a lot of, what I do on Instagram from Chris Doe. Someone mentioned that in the chat. And so just to give him credit, but, having consistent typeface, that becomes my logo. That becomes my visual identity, because all a logo is a visual mark, visual identifier. So I don't think a logo is necessary for a personal brand at all.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would agree. I have a logo for more than my title, but I think it's my photo, my profile, my headshot that's more important. And then my hybrid title is part of my introduction and my header in LinkedIn. So that's where I'm using that instead of a logo. I think the hybrid title is sort of that power. Okay, I'm going to jump into the next one. I'm going to jump down to this one. What are your thoughts and suggestions on hiring someone to manage your brand? Mark, yes. I'm throwing that to you.
Yeah, great question. And so I've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars with agencies testing this. This is my own personal experience. I'll just tell you what I learned. It's not good, especially for your personal brand. No one can write like you. Now, the only caveat to that is if you have a ton of content, like Sarah Beth is a great speaker. She's written a book. So if you can find someone that can scrape that content and turn it into personal brand content, that can work, but it's expensive. It's like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a monthly retainer. If you don't have all that existing content, it's not going to work. Now we're right now even not a sales pitch. I'm not offering anything, but we're developing it in-house because we had such great success where we have this hybrid model where our clients that came to us and said, hey, can you create personal branding for me? It was like, sure, you're going to have to create all the content. We'll coach you, we'll advise you, we'll show you how to do it. We'll help you with content calendar and all these questions we answered. We'll design it for you, but you're going to have to come up with the thoughts and the words. Yeah. And that's the only way that I really see it working. And so, especially if you don't have it as an engine or chugging for you, I'd highly recommend you spend the time. And I'll just kind of wrap it up real quickly here in that, I don't want to sugarcoat this. It's a lot of work, but it's totally worth it. I think it's great. Like I said, I wish I would have done this before. It's been the greatest thing for my business. It's created leads and a voice for me, but you're going to have to do the work. There is no kind of just pay someone to do it. At least I haven't seen it work well that way.
Yeah, I agree. Likewise, I'm still sort of trying to refine and figure out more about my voice and my own content. So I'm not ready to hire someone else to manage it because I want to own and control what's going on right now. Okay, we're going to move to the next question, which it looks like, if you are a get it done, no BS person, how to turn this into an attractive, non-scary sounding brand? Ooh, interesting. I'll take a stab at that first, Mark. So I think part of your brand is figuring out what are your core pieces, what do you really stand for? In my language, when I do this as identity work, I call this your primary identities, because oftentimes people sound like identity soup. They are listing so many things they're good at and can do that you don't know which ones are truly their best or brightest or the ones they love doing the most. So if you want to first just dial into what are the top important parts of your identity that you want to celebrate and showcase, and then I say put that into your Venn diagram and figure out how those things are mixing and combining together, that helps you find these key themes and ideas that are your no BS, like this is who I am, and I have a better way of explaining it to you than listing a ton of stuff. It's hard to give you a snapshot of that in 30 seconds like I just did. It's really a journey I explain in my book and in my workbook. So if you want to follow up with me, I can give you more suggestions. Mark, do you have anything you want to add to this one?
I do. I love this question because back to this idea of authenticity, you can't be something you're not. If you're truly a get it done, no BS person, that's a great brand for some people. And I think we didn't even talk about this. Like, you are not going to appeal to 98%, 99% of the world. You just want that 1%. You just want those people that love you. And recently, I just saw, from, I think Christo sent it to me. It was this idea that there's this woman out there, I can't remember her name, her brander. She says she is the Michael Bay of branding. And her tagline says, I blow SHIT up.
Isn't it Cindy Gallup?
Yes. And so she's like, she is a no BS. I'm going to come in and blow up your company. I
love her.
What I do think is funny is I've seen a lot of badass branders, and that's now becoming like this kind of like rote kind of thing. It's kind of getting played out. But if you are no BS, like, be that. Like, that is cool. And people want that. People want you to come in. If that's your style, there's a whole market out there that's going to love you. Tell people that, because clearly if you get into with someone who doesn't like friction, that's going to be a really bad engagement, and that's going to be a really bad way to go. And so go ahead, be the get it done, no BS person. Just be real about it and do it. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and people, I think we're saying it's good to attract and repel audiences because you're finding your niche, and not everyone's going to love you. And like you just said, you don't need 99% of people to love you.
Yeah,
so I think that was really great.
Great comments there for sure.
Great comments. And Omar mentioned Ikigai, which is a Venn diagram of what you do, what the world needs, what you're passionate about, what you get paid for, something like that. I think it's a great framework to understand intersections again. And I always ask people, what do you call yourself? What is your identity when you found your Ikigai? Because without that label, you still sound a little confusing. And to me, that's where the branding and identity are neck and neck and play off of each other. What is your story and what is your identity? Let's see, we've got another question here that says, what do you recommend if you're blending very personal and professional identities together? I'm a cancer thriver and a headhunter. Yeah, this is, the identity work is really up to you if you want to bring in identities like being a mother or a soccer player or a cancer thriver, the personal sides of your life. And my question is, what does that mean to you when you see the cancer thriver and headhunter combination coming together? What are you doing? What value are you bringing into the world? How does that make you unique? And what do you want to call yourself when that combination of you exists? So I think it's up to you which identities you're combining. Your hybridity is your own. You own it. And I think experiment with it, play with it, and define what is the value, what is the brand of that. That's what we've been talking about. Do you want to add anything else, Mark?
Yeah, well, this is Katie, and she's a dear friend of mine. We met while we were on program together at a charitable foundation that's dear to both our hearts. We were there for different reasons, called First Descents. And you might have seen earlier, we exchanged, part of it is you get a nickname, and mine was Hollywood from my time there, and hers was Emoji. But so I think that Katie, I think that really comes down to, like, do you want to blend them? Do they have to be blended? And I think that is a bit of exploration. And what are you trying to achieve? Maybe, and I don't know, Sarah Beth, you know better than I do. Like, is there an opportunity to potentially split those identities, or do they need to be blended?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
I'd say that's up to her to decide.
Yeah. And so we can work on that too, Katie. Give me a call. We'll talk about it.
Okay. This is going to be our last question because we're at the top of the hour. And just, again, I wish we could go so much longer. So we'll wrap it up with this one. The question is this: when does it make sense to separate personal social media accounts and create separate ones for your business? I'll be honest, I'm going through this myself right now. I have a personal Instagram, but then I have more than my title as my business Instagram. And people have told me conflicting advice. They're like, you're like Brene Brown. You should just be your name and all of your other things funnel underneath that. And I think that could work. I haven't made that transition yet. So I would love to hear from you, Mark. What do you recommend in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're a smaller business, my recommendation, there's nothing founded other than my own opinion on this, is to always just put it under your name. That's what people want. Like Sarah Beth, people want you. They they
So
come
to
for
change.
they come for you. That's who they want. And I fought that for so long. Like you'll see years and years where everything was under Wild Story, and like I didn't want to be the face of my business. People said the same thing, conflicting advice. If you become the face, it won't be worth anything, and you'll just become this huge thing. And I think people want to interact with people. I want to interact with Sarah Beth. I don't want to interact with, more than my title. And that's just kind of who I like. I don't know who that is. I think there's another challenge that we get where when you get a little bit bigger, even not huge, say you have a business of 5 to 10 people, that business gets kind of diverse with points of view. It's like you have men, women, different identities, different ages. And it's then like, what does that brand sound like? And that can become something different than you. And I also think it's your goals. Like one of the reasons I have it under my social is I'm building my personal brand. Like I can take that with me. I can speak with it. I can do other things with it. And so I think that when it comes to personal branding, you always want it under your, to come under your name. When it comes to social media accounts, it's like, well, what are your goals? And, for me, social media is really about providing value to an audience. So are you providing a value to your audience at both ends of the spectrum? And if not, just put one on pause. I mean, build up a following, and you can always direct people, but I also think it's exhausting to manage multiple social media accounts. The beast is hungry. It's hard to feed both. And so, I'm a big fan, and you can just see from my own experience of if you want to be known for something, if you want to build authority, to have a personal brand. Now, if you have the bandwidth, and like say in my example, you have a creative agency and you have the ability to build a secondary channel, sure, why not? But if you're only choosing one, build it around yourself. People want to, know you. And some of the biggest, we don't talk about VaynerMedia. We talk about Gary Vaynerchuk. It's like he's,
right.
Like we don't, right. And he drives all that stuff to his business. We don't talk about the future as much as we talk about Chris Do, and he drives a ton of people to the business. So I don't know. That's just my opinion.
That's a good one. Well, I'm going to have to rethink how I'm doing my social and branding. I'm going to wrap us up here and let Mark say final words. I just want to thank you a ton, Mark. This has just been mind-blowing, and the amount of questions and responses obviously shows people were getting a lot out of it. And the handout, if people haven't gotten that yet, is a great summary and snapshot of today's conversation. Please share what you thought of this on social, because we love hearing your thoughts and comments. And I have a book if people want to know more about hybrid identity and how to find it. I have a lot of tools and an online course. So check out my website, morethanmytitle.com. Mark, where can people find you, and any parting words?
Yeah, so I'm easily discoverable by my full name, MARCGUTMAN, on Instagram or LinkedIn. Please follow me there, engage, comment. Always, I love when people connect with me and then either DM me and say, hey, I connected with you, and and I'm coming to you from the masterclass you did. It just helps me connect with you and remember who it is. So do that. Wildstory.com, as it sounds, and then the podcast, Baby Got Backstory. But to Sarah Beth's point, let this be the beginning of the conversation. I'm so honored and just always amazed that you guys show up and engage and are here, and hope this was helpful. And let's continue the conversation. Hit me up offline, and happy to help in any way I can.
Yeah, likewise. I love all those DMs and pings. It's that personal connection to keep it going. Well, we are going to let you all go back to your lives and take a lot of this new knowledge. Mark, tremendous. Huge gratitude for your time and all of your thoughts. So thank you, everybody. Till next time. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. Thank you, everybody. Bye.